The best of the week on Relevant Radio.
This is from Elena, and she says, I just heard your call earlier about violent video games. I agree with what you said and how you guided the caller. That said, I'm a boomer, and we used to watch TV Westerns all the time, talk about violence. Not to mention sagas and epic movies. We were surrounded by violent shows, but I don't recall anyone freaking out about it. It was normal, and no one, or at least not many, turned out to be violent. What's the difference today? I appreciate your brain and your intelligence, so thank you for your learned response. Well, I don't know how learned it is, but I'll offer you my thought. Perhaps the distinction I should have made a little more clearly is that my response was geared for an 11-year-old girl. And obviously, you being a boomer, you are not in that same category. You're not of a tender young age the way she is. So the advice I was giving her would be suitable for a child. I have seen plenty of violent movies. I like Tombstone, probably my number one favorite movie ever. And there's a lot of violence, a lot of shooting, a lot of blood. And I dig it because I understand it's not going to hurt me. It's certainly not going to, incite me to commit violence of my own. I don't like, and I'll share this with you just by way of my own personal proclivities here. I don't like, and I proactively avoid movies like slasher films, horror movies that have violence in them, things where people are going to be, just in some way violently harmed. I don't like to see that. And for me, I draw a distinction between that kind of disturbing, and I use the word gratuitous before, I'll mention gratuitous again, kind of violence that I think I can only be harmed by, as opposed to historical war, Tombstone, which is historical, things in which the violence is part of the story because it's like a battle, let's say, or a gunfight, let's say, something like that. Those kind of things don't bother me. In fact, I like them. I liked Saving Private Ryan. But even within that movie, that scene where the soldier, in essence, kills the Jewish soldier by thrusting a dagger slowly into his heart, I don't want to see that. So when you say what's the difference, I would say twofold. One, I was talking to a child. Two, I personally differentiate between the kinds of violence and the kind of violence that doesn't affect me in a negative way versus the kind that does. Now, last thing I'll say, I'm quite prepared to believe that there are people for whom any kind of violence, maybe it's Tombstone, it's just too much for them. They don't like it. It makes them unsettled. It harms them in some way. Then I would say avoid it. But if it's something that you have a capacity for and it is a realistic or reasonable, there's a reason for it in the movie as opposed to something gratuitous, I'd say that, to my mind, seems okay.
All right, longer. Let's do it.
All right, after the show, meet you outside. But last thing I would say is I personally encourage, or maybe discourage, as the case may be, anybody who asks my opinion, I would say don't waste your time and your brain cells on slasher movies. There's that whole genre of horror movies that are all about people being killed in grisly ways that I don't think there's any good that can be derived from that. And to be entertained by that, to me, is highly questionable. To find that entertaining, to see the babysitter attacked, in the movies, it's just not a good thing.
Can I add to that?
Yeah, please do.
So she's talking about old westerns and current video games. So
Yeah.
even with the new westerns, like the ultra violent Tombstone and anything else you might see, Saving Private Ryan, those are, you're passively watching. So you're a spectator watching a story play out. When you're playing a video game, you're actively involved in the violence. So I think there's a difference there, and the amount of violence in the video games is exponentially worse than what we grew up with on television.
That's a good point. So you're in the what's the word? The role of the shooter,
That's right.
If you're playing now, what about like a military game? Let's say like a Call of Duty, and you're on a battlefield and you're getting shot at by bad guys and you're shooting back at the bad guys. In my view, that is a more immersive form of violent entertainment. But to me, that's more legitimate than and to me, that would be somewhat akin to watching Saving Private Ryan or Band of Brothers in the battle scenes, compared to you are in a video game. And I don't know what these games would be called, but let's say there's a video game where you're a mass murderer and you're just going around killing people. I would recoil away from anything like that. And I would say that would be detrimental to the person who's playing it by being entertained by killing innocent people. That's where I would draw a line.
I agree. Yeah, I think there's a dangerous line there that's been crossed. And as video games become more immersive and kids are getting lost in VR, where they're having a hard time distinguishing. They would disagree with this, but they're having a hard time distinguishing between what's real and what's not. What happens when a kid is in this firefight and they're blasting and things are getting blown up, and then they take their the VR off? Is there any danger of PTSD? Because their body doesn't really know the difference between what's real and what's not. When you're so immersed in the action and the moment, and you're running around and then you get blown up, and then you start in a video game, you just start over, or you respawn. But there must be, it seems like there's a dangerous line there that we've either crossed or we're getting very close to crossing.
I concur. I think you're astutely analyzing that situation. Now, not being trained in that field, I mean, I'm not being a psychologist or a psychiatrist. I don't know that I have the wherewithal to say, yes, PTSD can inevitably arise from that, but it sure seems plausible to me. And I'll give you an example from my own life. So when I was about 9 years old, 8 or 9, somewhere in there, and one of my uncles, who was about 7 years older than me, so how old would he have been? He would have been about 15, 16. He somehow convinced my parents to let him take me to the theater, but I'm certain that he didn't tell them what movie he was taking me to see. And the movie was The Sand Pebbles, starring Steve McQueen. And it takes place in China during the Boxer Rebellion at the beginning of the 20th century. And it's incredibly gruesome. There were several scenes that scarred me deeply. And I actually ran out of the theater crying. I was so traumatized by the violence that I saw in this movie. And I don't know what else I missed, but what I did see in the first, let's say, hour, I don't know how I stood it for an hour. It was so terrifying to me. I ran out into the lobby crying, and he, when he came out later, he was making fun of me. Oh, you baby, why couldn't you handle it? But I still, to this day, can remember how terrified and traumatized I felt. I don't feel the trauma now, but I remember clearly how hard it was on me as a child, and how many times over the years since then, I wished I had never seen those images. They just did a number on me because I wasn't old enough to see it. I don't even think I'm old enough now. I don't want to see those images today, all these years later. I think it would be too much. Now, a lot of people say The Sand Pebbles, never heard of it. Well, I don't recommend it. But if you've seen it, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. So, I mean, from my own experience, Cyrus.
Yeah.
Especially kids, exposing children to this kind of violence, it can have terrible effects on them that may not even show up till later.
Yeah, my similar experience is when I snuck in to see Aliens when I was, 10 years old. Mm-hmm. And the trailer sure looked cool, and I love Star Wars, and this is set in space. And so I paid to see Transformers, the movie, the old cartoon, and I snuck into Aliens, and I made it about 5 minutes.
Game over, man. Game over.
Game over is right. Yeah, no kidding. And I got up and out of there.
Game over, man. It's game over.
Yeah.
Too much for my 10-year-old
Very
eyes.
intense. Well, I saw the first Alien when it came out in 1979. I was in college, and the professor at whatever class I was in that day was talking about having seen it. I said, I got to go see that. And I did. And it was an incredibly powerful movie and very frightening. Now, if I saw it again today, it wouldn't bother me a bit because I know everything about it. But at first glance, the first time you see it, it was incredibly powerful. So I think by the time Aliens came out, it didn't have that kind of effect on me.
You're desensitized to it.
I was.
And I think that's the way I am with violence now in movies, where I'll see something violent and it won't even really register of how violent it is until I recommend it to someone more sensitive. Mm-hmm. And then I'm like, oh, wait a second. There was this one scene. You know what? Maybe I don't recommend this movie.
Yeah. Implied violence, which can be terrible unto itself, is one thing, but the graphically shown violence where you can't get away from it, it's right there and you see it. I don't want that. I don't want to see that. Now, I'm separating it out from Tombstone. I'll always watch Tombstone because I understand it, and I have a certain exemption for movies like that. Or
I'm your Huckleberry.
Band of Brothers, let's say. But if you were to say, hey, let's sit down and watch this slasher movie, there's no way I'm going to watch it. Not going to happen because I don't want those ideas or those images in my mind. I know myself. Kind of brings me back to being 9 years old and seeing the sand pebbles. Wouldn't be prudent at this juncture.
Not going to do it.
Not going to do it. Well, are you still a fan of the violent movies, or have you moved away from those?
I've moved away from slasher films. Don't do it for me. Like I don't care anymore. And I could say the same thing about action movies. Like I need a good story. Like show me characters that grow on me and that I care about. Those are the kind of stories I want. I don't need
Would you
CGI.
let your kids see? And they're all sort of like older teenagers now, but did you let your kids see slasher movies?
Yeah, my son is 19 now, and he thinks they're great, and he thinks they're fun. And I did show him Aliens when he was, 14, 15. Not Aliens, I mean Alien, the first one.
Yeah.
And the chest burster scene, he laughed. He actually laughed. I'm like, I'm raising a
I didn't laugh.
I didn't laugh
Everyone
either.
in the theater screamed when
right.
that thing
but
jumped.
That shows you how far and more realistic things have come. Because now watching that scene, it looks like a Muppet is running across the floor. It is out of context. If you put different music to it, it would be comical.
Yeah.
But at the time when I was a kid, that was super intense. And now kids have seen stuff way more intense.
And that's the problem.
That's the problem. Yeah. That's exactly right.
Yeah. Well, teach your children well. Someone should write a song about that. But all right, let's take a break. Good information, Cyrus. Thank you, sir. There it is. Everybody knows this song.
They should.
I'll be back.
That's a different movie.
That was the best of the week on Relevant Radio. The best way to listen to the best of the week is on the Relevant Radio app. Free and always free. Download and share the #1 free Catholic app today in the App Store.